Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Happy Hanukkah! Festive Kwanzaa! Wonderful winter solstice! Ramadan? Let's have some fun!
Ooh. Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101, 12 Nights of Christmas. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
The holiday episode of Promoter 101 podcast. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year's. I'm the one they call W. Luke Pierce. Joined today by, of course, Dan Steinberg. Happy Kwanzaa, boys. How you guys doing?
Happy holidays, my friend. So excited about this episode. The Terrapin Station founder, Jonathan Shank. You sat down with him for a fireside chat at Aspen Live, Luke. I was in attendance, and I gotta say, probably the best interview I've ever seen you do.
Well, thank you, Dan. Always great to sit down with friends like Shank. Such an accomplished guy. So many stories from Shank that are outside of what he's known for from family entertainment. He's got stories from the dead, jamming with Walter Cronkite, jamming with Bill Russell. I mean, it was awesome, Dan. Can't wait to play that interview out today.
As Adam Sandler would say, Jonathan Shank lights the menorah. So very excited to have a member of the tribe featured this week on Promoter 101 and a very dear friend. I thought you guys did an excellent job and looking forward to everyone hearing the love that Jonathan Shank brought to this industry.
Hear, hear.
The Promoter 101 Holiday Show starts right now.
Luke, we have got so many episodes of Promoter 101 in the bank, and you can find them at promoter101.net.com. Anywhere you find your podcasts, they're all saved, banked. All you have to do is search your favorite person in the industry. Odds are we've probably interviewed him, and you can go back and check it out.
Treasure trove of stories and knowledge, 238 episodes. So many worth checking out, Dan. I got a nice phone call this week from Al McCree, a longtime listener to the podcast, saying he had gone back recently and listened to some of our interviews from back in the day, and they still hold true. So if you're looking for some information, some insight, some stories about the business, go check out Promoter 101.
Promoter 101, live and direct.
Feel free to hit us up with your ideas and questions at steiny@promoter101.net.
Luke, so much happening at Promoter 101 is going to talk to you about the news of the week, the news of the month, and the wrap-up for the year. What's going on out there, Luke? Talk to us about the news of the week.
Dan, I want to start us off because it's the end of the year on an article that ran in Billboard, which posed 14 big questions for 2026. Rather than the feel-good recaps, they asked some hard-hitting questions facing our business in 2026. I think these are some of the conversations that are going to be happening behind closed doors at a lot of major companies. So let's pull out a few, Dan, maybe talk about a little bit of each one of these things. First of all, big question they posed here. Can the DOJ's antitrust review of Live Nation and Ticketmaster lead to structural changes, not just fines and PR slaps? The industry's watching to see how far regulators are willing to go here. Any predictions for 26, Dan?
I think Live Nation is prepared for this, and I think they're ready. I have a feeling this is going to be a whole lot of hyped news that just doesn't land.
Yeah, that's where it seems like the direction is heading right now. I mean, politically and otherwise, everything is stacked in the in Live Nation's favor in terms of proceeding towards some sort of dismissal around this. I don't think this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back or whatever precipitous situation people think that Live Nation is in right now. How about this one, Dan? Will Spotify's new monetization strategy, including its 1,000-stream payout threshold, hold up? Or will the artist and indie label backlash force a rollback? There seems to be a growing sense of mistrust between these digital service providers and the long tail of the creative community. You got Daniel Ek out there in the world exiting Spotify stock and buy missile technologies that are bombing Israel at this point. I think there's some real out-of-touch behavior from some of the executives of these streaming services and a push towards the artist-centric payout thresholds that could really benefit some streaming artists here. Last one here, I'll give 3 questions out of this. Are we approaching a ceiling in mature streaming markets? The US and the UK seem to be essentially saturated. Growth is going to have to either come from price hikes, new formats, or underdeveloped territories. Streaming penetration rates in the United States, Dan, approaching record highs. Even with the price, increases that we're seeing across your Apple Music, your Spotify subscriptions, those revenues aren't really what's driving the global growth story anymore in recorded music. It's all third world countries coming online with new streaming services and new presences for it. So are we seeing the plateau of the recorded music business?
You're going to see emerging markets come out globally. So yeah, maybe America's already well covered, but I believe you're going to continue to see the rest of the globe, particularly in some of the third world countries, really help grow this space.
Well, we certainly already saw a little bit of that baked in already in places like India and Africa, like the EMA territories and the investments that streaming services have made in terms of licensing. EMA in particular, in the last 5 years has really represented kind of the underbelly of the growth of recorded music over the last 3 to 5 years. We've already seen wanes from the UK and the US slowing during this time. Places like Africa, India, China certainly come online as a major player in recorded music. How long does that last? How much money can you really get from these places? I mean, your average revenue per user in the United States, something close to, $20 a month or something like that for recorded music. In India, it's closer to $1. So really, what are we talking about here in terms of growth? And should the recorded music business be concerned about that?
The number of people in India, if you get them at $1 a piece, you're going to win on volume. What you have to keep in mind is when you trade in your old iPhone, that's where it winds up. So some of these people are getting technology in their hands through smartphones for the first time, and they're able to stream music through these sources. And that becomes more available and comes online. You're opening up to this massive base down there. And it really is a game changer for them to have that technology in their hand. But these are emerging markets that are changing because these little computers are falling into their hands and they're becoming more and more available to them. So the growth you're going to see in emerging markets is exponential. And just like anything else, as America and the UK and most of Europe get saturated, they're growing these global brands. And that's when it worked, they grow them. That's what happens. It's what happened with touring too. You're seeing a lot of these markets open up. You're seeing bands like Oasis and Coldplay go to places that we're not used to. Same thing with what's going on in Dubai. It's just amazing the number of acts that are playing over there and what they're doing with the Formula One stuff. There's an emerging market that didn't exist 25 years ago, but now is just gangbusters, and the economy there is insane.
Great points about what we're seeing in the live story in 2025 and where some of the biggest shows in the world came out of this year. By gross, certainly in the United States, but in terms of growth rates and what you're seeing in a year-over-year comparison, plenty of places out there kind of shocking the world this year with the size of the live business.
But the live business wouldn't exist in those places if people find that music, and that's how they're finding it, is on those smartphones and those tablets. And the internet's finally coming to those places that is 30 years behind the rest of the world.
Yeah, no doubt. The Billboard article is certainly worth checking out. Other questions to consider. Dan, maybe in 2026, we'll do some 2026 ahead predictions, maybe in one of our podcasts here, see what lies out for the future.
And since you mentioned Billboard, I don't think we can not address Dave Brooks no longer at Billboard. He's making a lot of noise on social media since they let him go about different topics. And it seems like maybe Dave wasn't breaking eggs as he was keeping the peace while he was at Billboard. But he's definitely doesn't have his hands tied right now, and he's making lots of sounds.
I'm starting to see both Dave as well as some of his other colleagues from the Billboard Media Group exit last week. Another story certainly as well too, Dan, seeing some changes out there in the world of music here as we approach the year end. Hearing about some cutbacks in independent promoters, hearing some obviously media cutbacks that are well publicized in the Billboard spaces. What are you hearing out there in the world, and what should we be paying attention to as we roll into 2026?
I mean, I'm hearing the same thing everybody else is hearing. It was a tough year. The economy, the tariffs, the market being stagnant for the first 9 months. It made things rough. Credit card debts are insane, and people aren't going back to see the same act that they know is coming back every year, that's been there every year. It's got to be something special and worth spending your money on. And people are definitely being choosier and more savvy about what they're buying and what they're going to see. Because you're not just competing with a movie coming out now. You're competing with the streaming services, people not wanting to leave the house, people enjoy being home. The death of the movie theater, what you would think would only help our business, but people not wanting to leave the house is a problem for all industries.
No doubt. It's going to be a choppy 2026 is my largest prediction here. I don't think that's too bold of a prediction to make given everything we all know about the space in the world. But the things that I pay attention to, in addition to what you mentioned on credit card debts, Dan, default on auto loan payments is at a record high for the last 20 years, which is usually considered a leading indicator of choppy waters ahead to come. And some of the stuff that I'm seeing on personal side and household side economics really do look concerning for a larger space, especially as people start to kind of tighten their wallets a little bit, and as we see credit continue to tighten a little bit here too, which is a concerning double whammy for people that are already overspent, over-indexed at this point. So
I do want to point out the end of November and beginning of December are tracking better than they had been in October and early November. So I think signs are improving, and I'm hearing that. I was hearing that in Aspen. We're seeing good signs across the board that things are getting better. It's not back, but things are loosening up a little bit.
yeah. Next up on the news, Dan, I want to talk about another huge legal showdown that's brewing. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear Cox Communications versus Sony Entertainment, a case that could redefine how copyright liability applies to service providers and, by extension, platforms, hosts, and even AI companies. Core issue around this case is contributory infringement. Cox lost a couple cases in the lower courts for not policing repeat infringers on its network, i.e. turning a blind eye to users pirating music. But Cox argues that being an ISP shouldn't make them a copyright cop. If SCOTUS rules broadly on this, it could really upend the safe harbor protections that many companies have relied on since DCMA came into law in the early 2000s. It could spell problems for YouTube, SoundCloud, and practically every AI startup scraping music data sets. Even cloud storage providers like Dropbox and Google Drive could be impacted by all this. The rights holders are hoping for a ruling that expands liability, giving them leverage to go after these platforms that knowingly benefit from infringement. And on the other side, of course, tech companies fear this might have a chilling effect on innovation. Depending on the decision, this could be one of the more consequential copyright rulings since Grokster versus MGM. Oral arguments are set to begin this spring.
I got to tell you, I've been reading the John Malone book, and the world of cable is really a deep dive into this book. And whether you know him from Linear Media or F1 or Live Nation or Ticketmaster or from his days involved with bringing cable and internet to the world, it is a fascinating book. And well, it's a long one. I have to say that Born to Be Wired is a seriously entertaining read. And anyone that wants to know about how to build a business should take a page from John Malone.
I definitely, as we're talking here, Dan, I just put that in my Amazon cart. I'll pick that up. It's been a great year for biographies in the entertainment space. I don't know if you got a chance to read Diller's book, Who Knew? Fantastic reader of the summer.
Especially when he gets to Irving at the end.
Yes. Yeah.
That is particularly an entertaining story to hear from the horse's mouth.
Yes. But I'll have to go check out Born to Be Wired. It sounds like a phenomenal read.
The juice is worth the squeeze.
That'll do it for News of the Week. Wouldn't be Promoter 101 without some tweets of the month here. Maybe this is a holiday edition now, Dan. Why don't we start here? 'Tis the season for dreaded pink slips to fly. Early word is the shakeups are big and deep this year. I hope you all find safety in this holiday season.
Sadly, it could be a bloody week to come, Luke.
Yeah, kind of crazy what's out there. Choppy waters ahead. How about a more positive one? This isn't positive either.
You got to leave that in. That's awesome.
We're really in the Christmas spirit of these tweets of the month here. We're going to make it out of Ebenezer Scrooge straight into some happiness here, I swear. But for now, don't start here, Dan. Everyone is happy to take from you, but few are willing to give back to you. Those who do should always be cherished.
I think this is a positive one. You got to really love the relationships that have a true give and take. It is a positive message. Value the people that give back to you. Value the people that you consider real friends, not just the people that got the hands in your pocket.
Be thankful.
Positive one.
Be thankful for real friends. Yeah, that's a good one. I just read the first couple words and was worried I was going to drop it at the landmine on people. No more pink slips. How about this one, Dan? Most people are just waiting for their turn to talk.
Yeah, sometimes there's more to gain by shutting the fuck up and listening. We should have an episode where we just listen and not talk at all, Luke. Just silence. I don't know if that's going to work.
Hey, we could be a sleep podcast, and just play drowning brown noise the whole time.
I don't think that's where our wheelhouse is.
I don't think so either.
All right, well, those are the tweets of the week. That was what's on my random thought mind this week.
Make sure you follow Dan on X. He's at the Jew.
If anybody's still on X, I'm not sure anybody's fucking using that thing anymore. This month's interview features Terrapin Station Entertainment's founder, Jonathan Shank, for a fireside chat live at Aspen Live Conference with our very own Luke Pierce.
I'm really happy to be here today talking to the gentleman on my left here, Mr. Jonathan Shank of Terrapin Station. He's been coming to this conference since the early 2000s, and hopefully to many of you is a familiar face. And for those of you who don't know Jonathan, I hope you'll walk away today knowing him better and being impressed in the career that he's had for more than 25 years. So Jonathan, welcome. It's good to have you here, man.
Thank you for having me. I never envisioned myself up here.
Yeah, man. You've been a fixture at this conference since the early 2000s, right? What about coming to Aspen is so special for you? What's the magic here?
The community, something that you can't find anywhere else. And I think that there's a certain respect that everybody has for one another and a certain energy that everybody brings with them to this event. And we all kind of go to various conferences throughout the year. And I think we all kind of have this kind of wink where it's like we know we're going to get to Aspen and that we'll actually have a real time to properly catch up, because this is a place where you can actually spend a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour just looking at somebody and having a focused conversation as humans, and you can talk about your lives inside of business, outside of business. And I think everybody just enjoys all the familiar faces. We share a lot of interesting and exciting lifestyle similarities, and of course our craving for live music.
The people here in this room really do make this conference, and it's great to see so many familiar faces again this year. If I sat here and gave you Jonathan's bio or gave you a bunch of questions about your bio, we'd probably eat up more than the 45 minutes that Jim's given us here today. So let's start with kind of an abridged jump start on this. You started in the business working as an intern at House of Blues in New Orleans, where you went to school, right? Tulane guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then you moved to
First
LA.
intern.
First intern
At House of Blues, New Orleans.
Oh, number one.
Showed up at the doorstep. Sonny, who was booking there at the time, who then became Live Nation, for many years and booked the House of Blues, legendary talent booker. I just showed up there. My job was to hang posters in the bathroom.
I'm sure
and eventually to file bios too, but Sonny let me do that after I had hung the posters in the bathroom.
I'm sure the bathrooms in New Orleans are great.
And like the over-stapled telephone poles, I did all that stuff.
Yeah. So after your start there, you moved to LA. You jumpstart your career as a music agent, working with Ron and Peter Michael at American Artists.
Ron Rainey, Peter Shields, legendary.
Yep, all legendary names. You spent some time get to be an agent to Marshall Tucker, Jefferson Starship, Dave Mason, and so many more. And you end up running that agency from the late 90s to the late 2000s. And that's when you get an invite from Chip Hooper to come to this conference, right? What were those early days for you here at Aspen, and how did those early relationships kind of frame your philosophy around coming to this conference and just your wider scale of work?
What I remember is that Chip and Jonathan and I were working on some artists in 2002, Disco Biscuits and Particle. This was pre-Grateful Dead days. Yeah. And Chip and Jonathan said, hey, you should come to AADC, which is what it was called at that time. And so I came, but what was cool was that, of course, as a first timer, Chip, who loved big dinners and wine, and Jonathan invited me out to dinner, and that's where I met Jackie and a bunch of other people that are in the room here now. And Jamie might name me for saying this, but I kind of want to carry that forward tonight and invite a first timer to come to dinner with us tonight.
I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah, she's gonna not maim. You're gonna kill me. All right, we'll regroup on that later. But but Chip was, and Jonathan were so kind to invite me here and bring me in, and so I do feel a big pay it forward, philosophy and mentality.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that later on, but I feel like that mentality, the influence you felt here has sort of spanned your career. You're mentoring a lot of great young people today, and we'll talk more about that later on. But let's go back to LA and those kind of early social circles that you have in LA. Maybe those late days as an agent, your nascent days as a manager. You're running around with some crazy people here. I'm going to throw out some names. Dwayne Betts, Barry Oakley, Alex Orbison, Shooter Jennings. You end up booking Shooter's first show in LA, right?
Well, that was just who I was hanging out with in LA when I first moved to LA, is that at American Artists, we represented Robbie Krieger, and and his kid had a band, Oakley Krieger Betts Band, now known as Almond Betts Band. But there was many iterations of that band, but Dwayne and Waylon Krieger, Alex Orbison, Shooter, that was basically who I was like hanging out with when I first, and Sally Taylor, who lived here in Boulder. Rob Gordon and I did a record deal, I think in 1999 maybe, on Sally Taylor. She was James Taylor, or is James Taylor and Carly Simon's daughter. So I was just kind of lucky to be in these circles with all these people and knowing their parents and knowing them and being in the Doors family, et cetera.
So how does like running around in those circles kind of frame you up on those early days? I mean, does it like an influence, an impact on you?
I just remember like Shooter. Okay, so I've never told this story. I don't know why I'm going to tell it now, but I was dating this girl that was Marty Stewart's niece, cousin. I don't know the relation exactly. So we were in LA and she said, my friend Shooter's coming to LA. He's moving to LA. Da 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 da. Okay, great. So Shooter came, but he played heavy metal music at that time. And so I went over, and he was the only guy I knew that when he first moved into his house, he had pinball machines installed like right away. So I just said, okay, well, I'll call Bobby Reynolds and we'll book a show over at the House of Blues or Krebs. And so we did that. And then Waylon and Jesse came to the show. And I believe it was his first ever, the band was called Stargun. I believe that was his first ever booking as a band. He might have played other places, but certainly his first booking when he moved out to LA.
This is House of Blues.
House of Blues, West Hollywood. Yeah.
Foundation Room. So that
was, I don't think, it was main stage.
That was main stage?
It was main stage. I mean, and decently attended, but like one of those like Lodo ticket situations.
So somewhere along the way, booking shows in the 2000s, you start talking to Jeff Kramer from OK Management. He's got an office in the same building right down the hall.
This is what happened. Yeah. His suite was at the end of the hallway. He was managing Dylan and Paul Simon. There was a shared bathroom in the middle of the hall. I was working with Rainey, and we all knew each other. And Rainey, of course, came from the band and had worked with Steppenwolf and all these great acts. And so I would see Kramer, and he would just kind of be like, at the end of your day, when you're done being an assistant there, come down the hallway and come into my office. And he was just chain smoking cigarettes in there and talking to Bob Dylan. And so I basically got to just sit in the office listening to him speak to Dylan and Paul Simon and all the various, Columbia people at that time. And so I would basically just like moonlight and go there in the evening after I was done booking Marsha Tucker and Jefferson Starship dates and done with all Paul Kantner's demands for the day.
So was there anything like in those conversations or eavesdropping in those phone calls that kind of, edged you to pursue management or like maybe think about it
no, well,
than what you're doing as an agent?
I got the first job because Paul Kantner had a leak in his roof because he needed a loan from this guy, Gary Valoric. And that's how I got to basically meet Rainey, is through Kantner and Starship. And that's when I got hired. And then Paul was basically like utilizing me to like put together set lists and all like it was the Kantner, Ballin, Cassidy version of Jefferson Starship at that time.
Yeah. So you leave the agency, you've got some brief management stints at a couple shops, right? You're at Avenue and Direct and Velvet Hammer, but you finally landed AGP and Frontline working with Irving and Jared, right? That's the progression, I get that right?
Yeah, Jared and I had always talked about working together going back to college. Mutual friend from high school introduced me to Sid, Jared, and Craig. When Craig drove across the country from Philadelphia, my apartment was the first place that he stopped, but we had never met before. And so same friend from the University of Maryland, Tracy, was the person that introduced me to Jared and Sid in college. And so
and these are all summer camp friends from back east, right?
We all were from the same place, and we all went to Dead shows, and we were all in the same circles. Yeah. I mean, Jared and I got on some conference call when we were like 20 and decided we wanted to go to Polestar and start like a kids table, I remember. And so we had a long relationship. And when he started working with the Smashing Pumpkins, brought me over to work with Billy, got personally hired by Billy to come over and work. And at that time, that was just before the Ticketmaster and Live Nation mergers.
Yeah. So working with Jared, working with Irving, what was maybe the most valuable thing that you learned at Frontline working?
Answer every email.
That's it.
Irving, if Irving can answer every email, so can you. And also, there's only two real good answers to anything: yes or no. Maybe is okay, but then go and get the rest of the information.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I learned when I was there.
There you
Answer
go.
every
That's
email.
an applause for sure.
He does.
Yep. So while you're at AGP, you're working with Mickey Hart, you're working with Bill, you manage them, you win a Grammy in 2009 for Global Drum Project, which is probably a cool full circle moment from you, from going to be the agent on Jazz is Dead and JGB to stewarding his world as a manager. You also had the opportunity to introduce Mickey to Trey and George Porter Jr. So can you tell us those stories and tell them how those intros changed their careers and changed yours?
Took Mickey to Jazz Fest in New Orleans for the first time in 2005. I went out to dinner with my friends. He called me and was bored in the hotel. And so I told him that after dinner we would pick him up, which was a surreal moment. I packed my deadhead friends in the back of the car, and Mickey comes out into the lobby and gets into the front seat with his drumsticks. My friends all had tickets to the show. I did too, and which was at the Sanger Theater. Mickey and I went to the backstage door, and he used his drumsticks to knock on the backstage door. This was right 2005. Corin didn't even manage Fish at that time. He just the relationship had just started with Trey at that time. And so we came into the backstage, and Mickey had never seen Trey or Fish perform and had never met Trey before. And they spent a few minutes chatting and exchanging information. And I just thought in my head that, you know, I just got to introduce, you know, two of key players from, you know, seminal bands that I've seen perform hundreds of times over the years. And so it was a special moment. And then going to the fairgrounds the next day with Mickey and eating soft shell crab po' boys and, you know, just enjoying New Orleans. It was a special moment.
And the Jam, the Dead World has been a big part of your life for a long time. And during this time also, you get to spend some time with other people that are way into that scene. You got Bill Walton, Al Franken, Ramrod. Many of the Dead related figures are in your life.
I was living in Mickey's back house for a while. Mickey's wife was really the first person to ever tell me that I could be a producer, because I was putting together all these shows like Rhythm Devils and Rex Foundation and Gyoto Monks and Planet Drum and everything. And so there was an element of managing Mickey, but it really was the first seed of like producing shows for me. And so she called me down one time to the main house and said that to me. And it was like that moment in Back to the Future when the guy envisions himself as the mayor, Goldie. He's like, oh, I could be a producer, you know. And yes, when I was when I was at Mickey's staying there, yeah, Bill Walton would come up and he had a special drum kit that he would play, and had dinner with Al Franken and then rode to see his show. There's a whole story around that, and spent a lot of time with Ramrod before he passed. And I guess most important, I spent a good amount of time with Walter Cronkite. I got to go to Walter Cronkite's apartment for a drum jam. And
What's his
I got to
like?
meet Walter Cronkite so many times that my parents got to meet Walter Cronkite. Okay, so yeah, and he was an incredible guy. And the story there is that when we took some drums to Cronkite's apartment, and we rode up the service elevator, because they wouldn't let us up the regular elevator with the drums. They thought we were like vagrants or something. Is Mr. Cronkite expecting you? And then we got there, and we played drums, and then we got a complaint from the building that the neighbor beneath could hear the drums and if we could stop playing. And so Mickey and Zakir turned to Walter and said, do you want us to stop playing? And he had a great like bourbon that he was drinking too. And he says, let's play louder. In his, in his very like Walter voice, let's play louder, Also in his apartment, bro was still wearing the suit. True story. Yeah.
So Walter Cronkite, bunch of crazy figures in your life. Around or just before this time, you kind of make a splash in the political scene. You produced the inauguration for Nancy Pelosi in 2007 when she became the first female Speaker of the House of the United States. Pretty amazing.
Amazing.
You get the Dead, you get Wyclef singing Ico, and you told me that both sides of the aisle were singing along, which I mean...
This was 2007, though. That would not happen now.
It would not happen now.
But in 2007, yeah, both sides of the aisle. And I honestly think everybody, both sides of the aisle, was happy for that moment, for there to be a Madam Speaker.
Yeah.
It was a great, just a really deep moment, proud
Yeah, absolutely.
moment. And also Tony Bennett was there. So Nancy Pelosi's favorite performers were the Dead, Tony Bennett, who was Wyclef, and there was one other that I'm not thinking of at the moment, Bruce Hornsby. And so they were all there to perform for her at the inauguration. And I had to kind of teach Wyclef Ico in the backstage before his set.
It wasn't the only Dead related thing you did in Washington, right? In 08.
Obama.
Yeah, and this is 08 or 09?
Obama, Penn State. There was a handful of swing states. Obama picked that he wanted the Dead to come back together and play in Pennsylvania because that was an important state for that 08 election. And so we put together a show with the Dead and the Allman Brothers. That is the show that ultimately led to the Dead reunion for 2009. It was also an epic show. I believe the last time the Dead and the Allman Brothers ever performed together, about a 4-hour concert, of course, with Greg still alive and in great, form, and Phil, of course. But yeah, that was, Obama delivered a video message at the beginning of the show, and he had so many Grateful Dead references of going down the road and long strange trip, and he had every Grateful Dead reference in the video. It was amazing.
So did you know at the time when you were putting that together that'd be kind of the fuse lighting a spark for something greater with the Dead reunion? Because that was 2 years after that all went down.
It was months after that. It was summer of 09. Live Nation was already ready to go, I think, on that at that moment.
Yeah. So let's skip ahead some years at Frontline. You told me a story at dinner the other night that you were the first person to introduce Irving to Scooter Braun.
True story?
Yeah, on a deal that obviously didn't close, right? But, tell us that story. What was the idea?
For me or him? Story is that I became interested at a very early time with Asher Roth, and Asher was Scooter's first client. Scooter lived in Atlanta at that time, and Steve Rifkin had signed Asher Roth, and so I had connected with Steve Rifkin, who's legendary A&R, Wu-Tang, etc. And Rifkin said, Shank, you got to meet Scooter. And so we just started hanging out, and he didn't even have a place in LA. So we just started spending time and eating bagels. And I said to him, you should come work with me over at Irving. And we facilitated a meeting. I remember Rifkin emailed Irving and said, oh, you should meet this kid. That was how we facilitated that meeting. And I also remember at the time there were YouTube videos that Scooter had of Justin Bieber that he had shared with me, that I was walking around office to office in Irving's office showing everybody Justin Bieber playing acoustic guitar in somebody's living room or whatever. And I do remember Scooter saying to me, forget Asher Roth. It's all about this kid. It's all about this kid. Forget about that. At the time, I tried to bring Scooter in to work with Irving and Jared and I, and we had this big meeting, and that's where the story ends.
That's where the story is. Maybe if you catch Shank at dinner, you'll get the other bits and pieces of this thing, So at AGP, you mentioned Smashing Pumpkins, Paul Oakenfold, Eve. You're doing all this stuff with the Dead, producing all these things. Somewhere along the way, you kind of stumble into interest in Yo Gabba Gabba, something that you don't get as a deal, but you do some work on it, and that sparks something. You can tell us what you saw in Yo Gabba Gabba and what's stuck out to you.
That's what happened.
Kids.
No, this is actually interesting. Is that so? I took Yo Gabba to Irving. He had a CFO named Colin Hodgson, great golfer, by the way.
Oh, nice.
And if anybody is aware of Colin, and Colin is the architect for the family model that I use now. all the way to this day. We sat down and we hammered out how this, for 2 hours or 3 hours, how this financial business model would work with Yo Gabba Gabba at the time. And at the time, I didn't know that Luba was also, gunning for it. So funny that like 2 jam band guys were all of a sudden gunning for like a kid's property. Luba got the property. What I didn't know at the time was that the business model that we had built would be the business model that I would use going forward for Fresh Beat and Peppa Pig and all the other stuff. I did know when we didn't get Yo Gabba that I wanted to get the next one. And so I was already on the trail of Victorious and Victoria Justice. And I like knew that was emerging. And I was like, okay, not going to get Yo Gabba, but gonna get
the next one.
Yeah, I had it built.
You're right.
And yeah. And so credit to Irving and Colin for, giving me the space to build that business model, because it was different from anything that was happening at that time in that company.
Yeah. So before we get to Victoria and Fresh Beat and all the family stuff here, you leave Irving and you go to work and partner with Corn Capshaw at Red Light. Probably count on 1 or maybe 2 hands the number of people in the business that have worked for both Irving and Corin. So
I know 4 total.
4 total?
Well, Christine Kane.
Yeah.
I know of Janelle. I know of Jim. And I know of Ron Lafitte and myself. That's it.
Yeah. So we are one of 5 people still working in the business that have worked for both Irving and Corin. So which one do you like better? We'll let you off the hook on that one. So you move over to Red Light. You become kind of the centerpiece for family entertainment inside of that company that doesn't have a footprint in family entertainment at all. And you just started managing Victoria Justice, right? Which kind of leads you to Fresh Beat Band. So during your time at Red Light, you become the producer of tours for Peppa Pig Live, Disney Junior Dance Party, Fresh Beat Band, Octonauts. You've got an incredible run over at Red Light there. When you started doing this and really focusing on family entertainment in 2010 or so, how big were these businesses that you were looking at?
I don't know of anybody else other than Luba and I that were even interested. And Dan Berkowitz, it was like the 3 of us.
Berkowitz in this thing.
Yeah, it was we were the only people that were interested in that business at that time. And he was just developing his VIP business, and the family VIP business was off the charts. So it's just, that was, a big foundational piece before, a lot of these bigger VIP packages came along.
Totally. So you got a couple players in the space, but I mean, how these early Peppa Pig, Disney Junior Dance Party, Fresh Beat, talk about those tours. How big were these things when you first rolled these out? I mean, what were we talking about in terms of tickets, rooms, that sort of thing? What was it like for you?
Fresh Beat at its peak was 8 Beacons or 4 Garden Theaters, maybe like 4 or 6 Nokias, I guess we called it at the time. Definitely broke some attendance records. There was Gabba and Fresh Beat were going back and forth breaking attendance records at a lot of these venues at the time, Rosemont, because they were able to do 2 or 3 shows. The whole model, I think, and I believe Luba would align with this as well if he was hanging out with us, is that it was built on doing something different than Feld, because we had all grown up on this idea of Disney on Ice, and the kids were so far away from the stage and the entertainment that it was kind of like bringing families closer to the stage. So that's where like the multiples in theaters, and also honestly, the American restoration of so many great theaters over the past 30, 40 years is what's allowed this to happen. So I kind of say the kids that are going to these shows, if they're aged, 2 or 3 and they're sitting so far away, their field of vision can't even see to where Andy is back there, So, our goal really at the beginning of this was play multiple shows in theaters, sell them out, and obviously amortize the expenses.
Yeah. So we're going to skip forward here. After an incredible run at Red Light, in 2020, you leave to start Terrapin Station, which is now in its 5th year. Congratulations. Why did you decide it was the right time for you to step out on your own the way that you have? What was the decision behind that?
I think ultimately just to focus on, there's so many, pandemic,
right?
Right. So, that to me was the moment in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure when Napoleon hits the board and all the pieces go everywhere. So, I think that there was a lot of opportunity during that time, and there was a lot of uncertainty at that time, but it seemed like the right moment to transition to full-time into developing IP. less focus on management.
Yeah. So today, Terrapin not only continues your space in family entertainment, but you've crafted some other amazing deals in the last couple of years outside of family, namely in stadiums. In 2024 and 2025, you were involved with stadium shows with Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks, Luke Combs, Kenny Chesney. You did Breakaway Fest, 21 Pilots. How'd you, again, find yourself in this different space at that scale and at that time? What kind of brought you to stadiums?
Well, one thing that the pandemic brought was a need for all of these stadiums and venues to have more content. And it didn't matter how many shows the major promoters brought into these stadiums, there was always a need for more. And so if an average stadium was getting 4 to 6 events a year, they wanted 6 to 8 events a year. If an average stadium was getting 2 to 4 events a year, they wanted 4 to 6. It's not about greed, it's about scale. And I think, from that standpoint is that a lot of these stadiums just don't have content most of the year. And so it's not just about the selling of tickets, it's about concessions and all the other ancillary businesses as well. So that was where the need for that business really was born out of the pandemic. We did start with the Brewers in 2018, had a quick stint with the Diamondbacks, and got Elton John to play at Chase Field in Phoenix. And that was like a really quick proof of concept of like, okay, we can get a show. And then right after the pandemic, we called Dennis Arfa, took a shot to get Billy Joel into AT&T Stadium. And he thought we actually had Jerry Jones send Dennis a Cowboys jersey with the number 23 on the back of it, and Joel, and a handwritten letter, that actually typed letter, but hand signed by Jerry Jones, literally telling Arfa how great of a career he's had and how much of an honor it would be to have Billy Joel. And so we finally get it, because basically Billy had always played in the baseball stadium across the way. So we got the offer across from the Cowboys to Billy Joel, and then Dennis said, well, if we're going to do a stadium that big, we need support. And so that is how the seed was dropped for bringing Stevie Nicks on to support Billy Joel. And so that was the first Stevie Nicks Billy Joel show. The Cowboys were the first team to step up and pay the guarantee. There was definitely some uncertainty as to whether or not the gross would reach a place where everybody would be satisfied. But I will report that the gross was, I think, around $11 million for that show. Dennis is just a master of pricing and understanding scaling and flexing, and understanding, what's needed to make 1 and 1 equal more than 10 million, I guess.
So you've done 24, 25 of those? How many shows have you involved with in stadiums the last 3-4 years?
Probably between 15 and 20.
And 20?
Yeah, and some of them are, smaller scale.
Yeah.
5 to 8,000 as opposed to the, Luke Combs, which was 86,000 over 2 nights, and broke the record at American Family Field.
Yeah, insane. So in addition to those new ventures, you're still crushing in family, and that's kind of really what Jim wants us to talk about today. So we should spend a little time on it.
Oh, we're doing that?
Yeah, we're doing that. So at the end of 2025, I'm going to read this here. You've got deals with the rights holders for the #1 Netflix show, the #1 YouTube, a #1 new YouTube property, and the #1 Disney show right now. So that's an impressive run there to have 3 of those top shows across those rights in giant spaces. And right now you're just coming off of Gabby's Dollhouse, which was presented by Walmart, 75 plus city tour that wrapped up in this fall, right?
Actually going till next spring.
Yeah, going to next spring, added more dates. There you go. So tell us about Gabby's Dollhouse. Tell us about the recent run here. What's that look like? And maybe walk us through how you kind of started with selecting Gabby as a project, and talk about, how that all connects into your work as a tour producer.
Gabby's Dollhouse is a show that started out post-pandemic, 2021. It started out and has become Netflix's most popular children's show. They are in season 11, and the show focuses on Gabby and all of her cat friends. I had the idea to develop this into a tour in 2022. We partnered with TEG in Australia, who developed all of the creative and all of the, all of the script, etc., for that show. and they're amazing partners. But what we look at is a connection between content, consumer products, social activity, and just overall like cultural impact. Like usually, if only the kid knows what the name of the show is and not the parent, that's probably not something we're interested in. But it's all about critical mass, because this is all, by the time somebody's willing to buy a ticket to one of these shows, they'll have already had to watch the TV show, probably buy a plush doll or engage somehow with some consumer product. Maybe they've gone to a theme park and met the character. Maybe they've gone to like a shopping mall experience or something like that. And then they're willing to spend the $75 on a ticket to come to a theater. It is the ultimate trickle down to get to that 2,000, 3,000 people per market for each one of these shows. Like honestly, probably no different than a lot of artists, but in order to get there, the amount of money that a consumer would have to spend would, you've already spent money, you have the toys in your house, right? You've already downloaded the movies, you've maybe taken your kid to the movie theater to see it. After all of that, if the kid is still pulling on the parent's leg going, I need to go to this show, that's your core audience right there. And so we're completely dependent on that, on that trickle down effect. So essentially you need to make sure that all of the levels above you are properly foundational before you put one of these tours on sale.
So let's imagine we find something like Gabby here that kind of checks every one of those boxes, critical mass, retail partnerships, all the things that are important to being able to produce a show that's got 3,000 people that come to it. How do you start thinking about the architecture of a deal that you're going to set up with these rights holders? What's that look like?
So these are all license deals. So the entire model is built on, the job is really not that much different than the job of an artist manager, but the deal is a license deal with the studio. So we're licensees, no different than the person who's licensing to sell Mickey Mouse socks, and there are a gazillion licensees for all of these properties. We fall into a certain bucket of LBE, location-based entertainment usually, or live experience. So all of these studios, Paramount, Universal, Netflix, Disney, they all have departments that cover this. So essentially our job is, in the same way that we have relationships with agents and managers, is to have relationships with these studios and the people that are in place there. The construct of the deal is completely dependent on how greedy the studio is. These revenue streams have become so much more important to studios because they're not generating it from other spots. So all of a sudden they want bigger MGs, bigger minimum guarantees for these deals. They want higher royalty rates. They want to charge the promoters a per ticket fee for, just to have the rights to do the show. That stuff's all passing right by us. That stuff is literally all passing right by us. But I will say, if you were taking a scale and comparing a licensee relationship to a manager relationship, the licensee relationship would make 10x more money every single time, unless you're Taylor Swift. So, you're just you're just in on a much bigger piece of the pie, and you're also not worrying about, as that artist gets bigger, that your percentage is going to go from 15 to 10 to 5 to 3. And usually if you're succeeding with a Disney or whatever, the scale is actually going in your direction.
Going in your direction, in your favor as the producer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You recoup the capitalization, and then you move on.
Yeah. So you cut a deal here, minimum guarantee, some royalty fees back to the rights holder and this and the things. Then you got to build the show. You got to figure out what's going to go on stage. Some of these things are production heavy, right? They've got a heft to them where you've got to design and come up with the concept for all these things. I want to touch for a second too, just about a special story for part of that business that you acquired in 2023. Sitting right here, John Kisner from Black Ink, a firm that kind of specializes in helping tours outfit themselves with heavy productions. How have you kind of built the resources inside your company and partnerships like Black Ink to kind of service out the making of the show part of the business that you have to do to produce these tours?
First of all, this is a testament to Aspen and the community. John and I met at Aspen in 2018. In 2023, we acquired Black Ink, brokered the deal with Sony for Terrapin to acquire Black Ink. So that's just a testament to the strength of this community and the things that can happen with major companies, coming out of relationships that start here. In terms of building these shows, I think that it requires a team. Every one of these things requires a great production manager, casting director, choreographer, Black Ink has really blossomed into, in my opinion, the premier, not just services company, but also the way that they treat film concerts is unique to any company in the country, which is a testament to the success of Labyrinth and in the future Hook and all of the other properties that they are responsible for. But I think that it's just all in the reputation. Yeah, that's it. And we, it's no different than the artist community, where if you're Disney or Netflix or Paramount, you're holding things to the highest standard.
Right.
You're not bringing in somebody whose only experience is on a club tour.
Right. No schlubs out there at that scale, right? So having a great partner like John, having the talent around you to kind of build these businesses and run them, what does that do for you and Terrapin Station in terms of making you more competitive when you're out there bidding for these deals? You're not the only game in town, but how do you kind of showcase and pitch yourself against some competitors in that space?
Trying not to think of myself as competing with anybody in our own lane. And, if the, boxes that we can tick make sense for all of us, then it makes sense for, I don't really see it as, we're more surgical strikers, not blanket pitchers.
Yeah.
I trying to identify the next Gabby's Dollhouse. I'm not out there talking to 10 different things. It is all very, I call it's a much more surgical strike.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have 10 pitches going on at one time. That would be silly, and it's much more keeping a pulse on the scene and watching how things are reacting, within the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah. So after a couple of years of running Terrapin Station, you joined Sony Masterworks in a joint ventureship here. How does that partnership change the way you think about production? What does Sony kind of offer you as a partner that maybe like a standalone company like Terrapin Station couldn't have had?
The idea for Sony to enter into this business came from the idea of putting together companies that were doing non-traditional entertainment and acquiring different companies from different regions, Europe, UK, Middle East, South America, that all have different rights, whether that be Mundo Pixar, booking agent for Bluey, Light Trails, Labyrinth in concert. And when you start to put all of that together, it's a powerful portfolio. I think that the idea is that all of these companies together are, form a really powerful core in non-traditional entertainment.
Before I let you off here and before we open up the audience for questions here, I want to talk a little bit about some work outside of Terrapin Station, your involvement with some amazing nonprofits, including Music Will. So you're on the board of trustees for Music Will, or you're co-chair for the 2025 Music Will benefit. And that's the largest nonprofit music educator in the country. You had Wyclef Jean, Sarah Bareilles, Jackson Brown, Christian Twineth, all previous honors of these things. Talk to us a little bit about that work and why you found music education as something so important in your life.
Because we need the next bands. We need the next industry executives. And also it just ties back together naturally with everything that I do. Music Will is the largest music education nonprofit in the country. They provide curriculum, instruments, all different kinds of programs to schools around the country. We do school visits with artists. We're actually doing our first ever cultivation event in Nashville on March 19th with Allison Russell. And I hope to see all of you Nashville folks there. In terms of why this is important, it's important because we need the next generation of people to be ready to come sit in this room once they finish school. They might not be all ready to play in a band, but they might gain a new perspective of something they want to do in life. Maybe they discover they want to be a publicist or a booking agent or a creative director. And that's the light bulb that we're hoping turns on by providing music education in schools. And there's over 1,100 programs in different schools. It's just something that I feel like is necessary in our chaotic world.
The last point I'll leave you on here, you're talking about the next generation of musicians, bringing up the next band. You also spent last couple of years touring around, speaking to students at a variety of campuses, from Harvard to Cornell to Miami to NYU to USC to UCLA, Belmont, and others. last thing I'll ask you for here is, what is the message that you're telling those students that possibly want to work in this business, and what are you leaving them? What are you hoping they leave with after hearing you speak?
The simple message is there's a path for everybody. And especially I think for students now that they feel like the world, not just in music industry, is so competitive that how are they going to find their way? But the biggest analogy that I give them is, take their favorite artists or take, whatever artist they might be listening to on Spotify. And instead of just focusing on the artist, think about, I put it into like baseball cards or like Pokemon cards. Think about who like the manager is, the agent is, what their special powers are, what their, and really educate yourself. This is what I tell them is like, okay, think about, who is, who's the tour promoter for your favorite artist, who is the, think about all of the different steps of the Venn diagram, so to speak, and try to get them to think of the people in the industry as, as just as much the all-stars as the artists. And, figuring out who those people are, because that will be the path to getting them a job, but it also will be intelligence that will impress them in front of any one of us that was interviewing any of those people.
Awesome insights. So I'll do it here for Jonathan Shank. Let's give him a round of applause before we open up for questions here. We're going to open it up. We're going to open up for some questions here. For those of you, I didn't say this earlier, but we did record this for Promoter 101, the podcast. So if you're going to ask a question, just make sure you hop on a mic like Steve did back there. So Steve.
Yeah, so all the properties you work with are owned by a few big companies, Disney, whatever. Have you found doing the deal with Sony has like closed other doors? Like, does it make it harder for you to do a Disney deal when they know Sony is behind that, or how is that?
Great question. Great question. Relatively simple answer. Think about this. Sony Pictures, Spider-Man. Spider-Man, Marvel. K-pop Demon Hunters, Sony. K-pop Demon Hunters, Netflix. Cross-pollination everywhere. Just have to find it. It's a collaborative world out there. I'm sure Sony's kicking themselves for selling the rights to K-pop Demon Hunters to Netflix for $20 million. But at the time in the pandemic, that probably sounded like a great deal.
Great question. Anything else up there?
Yeah, I just had a question about marketing these actual shows, and how much of the marketing you can count on the streaming services like the Netflix, because they have all the data of the people who are actually watching these, or like, where do you find the people to even market to for these shows? Or is it just kind of like casting a wide net to like parents know about?
That's a great question. Look, no, you don't get that assistance from Netflix. And also there are strict laws in place in terms of marketing to children, selling to children. So, you have to be COPA compliant on everything. So listen, we're marketing to parents. That's really, the core demo is marketing to parents. It is done through social, and your, relatively what we would call traditional means. But we're using all data from previous buyers who have, been to these shows.
When you guys are creating the VIP on these family shows, where do you start with when you're trying to create these packages of a meet and greet with an animated character that doesn't exist, and how you're creating these things to get these parents to buy these really expensive packages? Because you guys have gotten really creative.
We've made it like a pre-rave for kids, where like we have like a little DJ and we have balloons and a dance floor, and they get out there and we get little tattoos, and then we have a meet and greet with the character, which is generally a costume character. For Gabby's Dollhouse, it's a costume character. I believe Eddie Meehan's in the room, who does the VIP for Gabby's Dollhouse and for Disney Junior. Yep. And Please and Thank You does an incredible job of offering these premium packages. But it's not just that, it's the customer service to the parents. They want to feel like that they spent $500 for their families to come here, that they're going to have a special experience. And, Eddie and his team do an incredible job of delivering on that promise. Hey, Mark.
I'm going to take the marketing a step further. So it sounded like you are very reliant upon a number of dominoes falling before it gets when it comes to the children's stuff. A number of dominoes have to fall before it gets to the touring phase.
Yep.
Either you have an incredible knack for finding ones that are going to click, you're not talking about the times that you've got hosed by.
Luke did mention them, like Power Rangers. Yeah, like we thought Power Rangers was going to be like the biggest. I'm happy to talk about those. Yeah, there are times when it doesn't connect. I mean, Teletubbies, I'll tell you right now, like none of the nostalgia stuff connects at this point. But thank you for saying that, by the way. But 10 years ago, we tried Power Rangers in arenas, and Frasca did an amazing job of booking the tour, and it just didn't sell. And it was also really hard to figure out what masked guys jumping around for 90 minutes on stage would look like.
Just one more follow-up, though. It seems like obviously there has to be a tremendous amount of trust between you and all of these other entities. Are you working with a lot of the same people so that there is that trust, or are you just taking a big leap of faith?
Yeah, there's a core amount of people. The licensing show in Las Vegas is kind of the pole star of this business. And there's also BLE in London.
Is that the licensing expo? What is that?
Well, it's got 2,000 people though, Jim, or 30,000 people or something.
Is that the licensing expo? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. And that's kind of the home base of these, relationships. And yes, working with a lot of the same people. And just like in our industry, it is a very tight knit circle of people. The same people are licensing Yellowstone that are doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that are doing Paw Patrol. Like literally the same person is doing all of those things. And you find that at Disney too. The same person is doing Descendants, who's doing, Disney concerts, who's doing, other than Feld, who has his own carve out with, with Disney.
Bob?
What gets you off about this? I mean, most of the people in the room, they try to be closer to the music. Yeah.
Listen, the answer to your question is I started this when my kids were little, and they were my A&R. They were my A&R people, and it just stuck, and I became the kids guy, at least for now. But that's also why I keep doing things like, with the San Francisco Giants and Peter Shapiro, a Heart of Town concert, because that actually personally is what gets me going is, my podcast, The Jam. But that also is my balancing act to all of the family stuff. I do feel like I'm one of a few people at this point that are doing it. I think I'm the only person that is, allowed to do Spider-Man in the world at this point.
All right, let's give another round of applause for Jonathan Shank here. Jim? Yeah.
Quote of the month. In life, all good things come hard, but wisdom is the hardest to come by. Lucille Ball.
I really do love Lucy, Dan, especially for that quote.
Nice drop in there. I like that. That was well timed. Quick on your feet today, Lucas.
It must be the amphetamines mixing in with his Mucinex, Dan.
Lucas got a little bit of a head cold.
I do not feel fast.
Going through. Luckily, you're not contagious over the web.
On Steiny, on Lukey, on Connor, the Promoter 101 Holiday Podcast has come to a close, and as Santa exclaimed, with a laugh full of glee, not an offer was pending, not even a door deal.
I like that one.
I like that one too.
Getting into the holiday mood, Luke.
We got to throw some holiday spirit, some holiday flair out there in the world, Dan, and Connor with an excellent interpretation of a classic right there. Friends, keep in mind, we want to hear from you all the time. Send us a note. Let us know how you're doing over the holiday season. Check in with us. You can hit us at steiny@promoter101.net. We'd love to hear from you. Love to be seeing what's going on during your Christmas and New Year's break.
That said, we had so many great emails for Big Block of Cheese Month. Feel free, if you want to pick our brains over the holiday break, reach out to that email, steiny@promoter101.net. That gets to me and Luke. If you got any questions you want to ask me, Luke, or Connor, we'll help you out. We'll keep Big Block of Cheese Month rolling through December. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you all in the new year. We'll be back January 29th. That's Thursday, last Thursday of every month as normal. Connor, who do we have lined up next?
Our January episode will feature the Latin promoter David Zamora.
Happy holidays. Have a wonderful new year. We're wishing you sold out shows for the holiday months to come.
Cheers! It's Hanukkah, it's Kwanzaa, it's New Year's, it's Christmas. You gotta call your mother. Come on, guys. Call your mother.
Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.